Good evening, members. Start with prayers this evening. Let us pray. We pray for the citizens of the world, whose rulers and human are fallible. We pray for countries where governments oppress or exploit their citizens, for countries divided by barriers of class, wealth, race, or religion. We lift before you the countries where people suffer the ravages of warfare or famine. And we pray that in the governing of their citizens, the rulers of the world may govern according to the will of the King of Kings. We pray for those whom we as servants are called to love and to serve. We pray that we may meet their needs and not our own, and we pray for those who have little status in the eyes of most, the destitute, the depraved, the criminal, the outcast, for those whose human rights have been infringed, the hungry, the persecuted, the tortured and the neglected. And we pray for those who find it hard to play a full role in society, for the handicapped, the unemployed, the lonely and the housebound. We pray for all those we know who are ill or anxious or depressed. And we pray for the bereaved and those dying, facing the reality of the boundary between life and death. We pray that we may show that in God's kingdom there is comfort and healing, acceptance and hope, and abundant life for all. And we pray for ourselves. We pray that we might retain proper priorities of patience and wisdom and love. We pray that we may take up our responsibilities with enthusiasm and with faith. We make this prayer in the name of Jesus. Amen. Please be seated.
New constitution.
Good evening again, members. Item number 2, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chairman. I have received apologies for absence from Councillor Coley, Councillor Carlo Guglielmi, Councillor Val Guglielmi, Councillor Bennison, Councillor Watling, Councillor Punian and Councillor Khan. Thank you.
Item number 3, minutes of the meeting of the 5th of September 2017. I'd like to sign these as a correct record of that meeting. I take that as agreed, thank you. Item number 4, declarations of interest. If there's anybody that wishes to declare an interest on anything on the agenda this evening.
Thank you, Chairman. On page 185, community governance, I should imagine we need to declare an interest as being a Harwich Town councillor, which that refers to it within that report.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. As there will be a number of parish and town councillors in the room, you don't need to all declare that, but I can see why you've done it in your instance.
Any other declarations taking that into account? Councillor Miles?
I'd like to declare interest in the question that a resident in Walton is going to be asking about the toilets. As a ward councillor, I'm supporting the petition. Thank you.
Thank you. Number 5, announcements by the Chairman. I'd like to begin with welcoming back Mr. Ford. I'm very pleased to see him back here. I'm also really pleased he doesn't have any stairs on the way to his office in this building. I'd also like to invite all members, everybody here, back to the Chairman's Parlour after this meeting for drinks and nibbles. Item number 6, announcements by the Chief Executive.
I have none, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 7, statement by the Leader of the Council. Councillor Stock.
Thank you. With your indulgence, Chairman, members, I have 3 statements to make, so bear with me. If I make the statements consecutively, and then if anyone wants to ask me any questions, I'm happy to take them in any order, Chairman, if that suits you. Firstly, Chairman, I'm delighted this evening to be able to inform members that the Council has achieved Disability Confident Leader status for the Council's recruitment practices and support for disabled employees in the workplace. This is the highest accolade for an employer that is positive about employing disabled people. The assessment process was rigorous and thoroughly tested by disabled people throughout. A number of recommendations were made and implemented, including an updated accessibility section on the website, which allows adjustments to be made, including audio, font size and colour. Council officers have been working towards this accreditation for the last 12 months, and Chairman Tendring is the only council to have achieved leader status across Essex. Very proud of it. Thank you. Chairman, the next one, I've got some really exciting news to share with Council. Last month I was involved in what can only be described as a very unusual but incredibly exciting bidding process aimed at changing people's lives. Sport England is currently looking to pilot and test some new initiatives aimed at addressing inactivity across the country's population. Across Essex, 22% of the adult population does less than 30 minutes of physical activity a week, and in Tendring that rises to 37% of the adult population who are inactive. Similar issues apply in parts of Basildon and Colchester. Inactivity leads to a variety of health conditions and is certainly contributing to the chronic obesity and diabetes crisis sweeping the country. Sport England want to explore new ways of getting people more active, as the current systems just don't work for everyone. There doesn't seem to be a magic bullet, and Sport England recognise that some of the new approaches they want to try will fail, but they want to work with willing and engaged partners who are up for the challenge of working with them to pilot new approaches. They don't know how this will work, and I suppose that is the point which makes this unusual, as we are bidding for a huge slice of funding, but don't as yet know how it will be used. Working in partnership with Basildon and Colchester and Essex County Council, we have submitted a bid for a slice of the £130 million which Sport England are prepared to put on the table to bring about a whole system change, and they are particularly keen to focus on those living in circumstances of deprivation, poor mental health, old age, social and financial hardship. Unfortunately, we seem to tick a lot of those boxes. Given the size of the prize, the £130 million total pot that's up for grabs, it's not surprising that community and system leaders from across the 4 councils are supporting this bidding process, and I'm pleased to say that we've already got down to the last 19 from the 100 plus who originally applied. The outcome of the bidding process will be announced very shortly, and it could mean significant funding being made available to see how we can make a real difference to residents' health and well-being. But even if we're not successful, the work which has been undertaken as part of the bid shows how strong community engagement is across Tendring, and the quality of the bid is a credit to the team who worked on it. I will update Council as soon as I have more news on that, Chairman. And then finally, Chairman, updated housing land supply planning. Many of you at the local plan committee meeting last night, and you'll have heard this first part, but it's worth repeating, I think. Members will be aware that this council lodged a High Court legal challenge against the decision of the planning inspector to grant the Centenary Way planning application. The outcome of the challenge is that the Secretary of State has decided not to defend the case, and in turn the developer has also decided not to take it further. The next step is for the court to decide whether the planning inspector's decision will be quashed, which will depend on the Secretary of State's reasons. Should the court quash the decision, the matter will then be remitted back for a further appeal. At present, there has only been a confirmation of the parties' decisions not to defend the challenges, and the reasons are still awaited, and members will be updated as soon as possible. But as I said last night, it's an incredibly rare thing for a council to do. I'm not aware of this council ever having done it before, and I'm not aware of any other council I know of having taken out a challenge in the High Court against Her Majesty's planning inspectors, effectively going head-to-head with the Secretary of State, and especially not winning, as effectively we have done. Now, it's only a battle that we've won. We may yet lose the war because we don't know how the actual appeal, the next appeal, will pan out. But on that, updated housing land supply, I also need to update members on the outcome of recent work undertaken to review the district's housing land supply. From previous briefings and reports, members will know that the Local Plan Committee requested that officers undertake a review of the housing land supply figure to ensure that this reflects an up-to-date position, taking into account inclusion of sites being actively brought forward which are in the local plan, the impact of recent planning appeal decisions, and an analysis of how new statistical data on population change impacts on projected housing numbers which the local plan should accommodate annually. The new data on population change, as published by the Office for National Statistics on 26th of October this year, just a few weeks ago, Chairman, has had the most significant impact. The population change identified an expected decrease in population across the district, resulting in a lower requirement for new houses per year. Our officers, working with the Council's appointed demographics expert, reported the outcome of this to the Local Plan Committee at its meeting last night. Following consideration of a report, the committee unanimously agreed to note that the outcome of the revised population projections produced by the Office for National Statistics in October 27 had the effect of reducing the objectively assessed needs, the base number for new houses, from 550 down to 510 per year, and endorsed the report as evidence to demonstrate an up-to-date 5.6-year housing land supply, taking into account any changes arising from the latest demographic information. Now, this work was presented to committee in order that it be used as the basis for the Council position in respect of forthcoming planning appeals, and therefore also to inform the examination in public of the local plan in January 2018. I trust that members will appreciate that any Council submission to an appeal or examination is the subject of final due diligence from Council. Further refinement of this today has resulted in changes to the figures reported to the Local Plan Committee last night. This means that the new housing requirement, or the OAN, the objectively assessed needs, should be further reduced from 510 to 480 houses per year. As a consequence, this therefore means that the housing land supply figure is increased from 5.6 to 6.2 years. These are the figures that will therefore be used by the Council in forthcoming planning appeals and put forward for the local plan examination in public. The Local Plan Committee has asked officers to carry out an assessment of the implications of the changed population and housing need figures for the local plan and more generally, and this will be reported back to members in due course. I appreciate that updating figures presented only last night is not normal practice, but I trust members recognise this further update is necessary following advice received today to ensure that the Council's position as planning authority is as robust as possible moving forward. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions on any of those statements? Councillor Henderson?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chairman. Testing. To ask the leader on the issue of the Sport England bid, there's one big reason why a number of people of all, or several people of all ages, are inactive in sport or activities around the district. It's because of the costs, and they're socially excluded from a lot of those activities that other young people and all ages actually take for granted, because there is a cost factor. Now, I've said this before in committee meetings and various other places. Being a football coach myself with a team, I coach young people who can afford to actually take part in that weekly and weekend events. So I just ask the leader, if this bid is successful, will he take in mind and look at the ways that we can include more people and they're not excluded because of cost alone?
Councillor Stark.
Chairman, yes, absolutely. I can't disagree with Ivan Henderson's comments that I can go further. I think it isn't necessarily the simple participation cost or the entry cost of going to a club, but it's the other costs that some youngsters in particular will struggle with. It's the cost of the kit. It's their parents, can they afford to taxi them backwards and forwards? Do they have a car? Do they have to put their child on a bus or get them in a taxi? Can they afford to do that? It's complicated, it's complex. I was asked a question by the Sport England team. There was about 12 of them there. They turned out in force. And we had a really good turnout from people from Essex. You know, the leader and chief executive of Essex County Council were there, a couple of cabinet members from Essex. We had various senior people from Basildon, from Colchester and from Tendring councils. And I'd make the point, actually, that the three districts are involved. We work really well together on this. And politically speaking, as members will know, you've got, I think it's a Labour UKIP administration running Basildon. You've got a Liberal Labour, get it right, administration running Colchester and whoever's running Tendring at the moment. And we all came together on this because we all spoke with one voice. And I was asked a question by the panel, you know, how do you get people active? And I said, look, I could give you a smart politician's answer, but to be honest, the truth is I don't know. I do know lots of ways that don't work, lots of ways of trying to engage with people that fail. I said, but I'm not going to pretend, sitting here, that I've got the answers. And one of them said to me afterwards, actually, that was the right answer, because if you'd said you did have all the answers, we wouldn't have believed you, because we know, that's the whole point of this exercise. They weren't asking for us to put forward a scheme to get people active. They wanted us to talk about our passion and what our statistics and demographics are and how willing we are to take risks. That was one of the questions. How willing we are to do things differently. So in answer to your question, Ivan, absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you. Any further questions on those statements? Councillor Broderick.
Thank you. It's not just a question, it's just to thank the leader for all his hard work and the way he's handled everything. And, of course, the officers. With regard to Slabbery's Lane, Centenary Way, it lifted my spirits last night. I've been a councillor for 10 years, and it's been doom and gloom, a lot of it, but last night was really enlightening. Can I ask how long you think we'll have for the result of Slabbery's Lane, for the JR on Slabbery's Lane, if we know?
Councillor Stock.
Well, the simple answer to that is we don't know. I can try to find out, Councillor Broderick, outside the meeting if we have any sort of further update, but some of these things are moving quite slowly, and then suddenly you get a phone call from the Secretary of State's office on the Centenary Way one saying they've put their hands up. We still don't know why. On the one you're more interested in, the Slabbery's Lane one, simply don't know yet what the timescale is on that. I would just like to thank Joy for her very kind comments there and echo what she said. And what the committee were quite clear about last night is they do recognise that a terrific amount of work has gone into this by our officers, above and beyond, frankly, the call of duty. And I'll just make the point that our senior planning officers, you know, people like Kath and Gary, who we see at these committees working really hard, they're going to have their heads down, most of the grindstone for the next few months, working on the local plan. I know Ian sent an email around to members. So if it's at all possible, if we could bear that in mind, and I said to Kath that I would speak to members about that, and then this morning I sent an email off myself to Kath asking her for something. So I'm as guilty as anyone, because we do have issues that come up, and I'm not saying, absolutely not saying, don't get in contact with our planning officers, but bear in mind they're extremely busy. And if there is another way of dealing with it, if you can avoid contacting them, by all means do. But just bear that in mind, and if they're not quite as speedy as they normally are, then you'll understand why. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Miles.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to congratulate the leader and the officers for the achieving of the Disability Award, and that we're really an exemplar council within Essex, and I'm really, really heartened about this and really proud to be a member of this council. So, well done.
Thank you. Item number 8, statement by members of the Cabinet. We have none. Item number 9, petitions to Council. There are none on this occasion. Item number 10, questions pursuant to Councillor Procedural Rule 10.1. We have a question from Mr. Walker. Mr. Walker, if you'd like to come forward to the table and use the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Please be seated, Mr. Walker.
Is that better? Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. I submitted the question a few weeks ago, and under the procedure, it's been tabled for tonight's agenda. The question is, the proposed closure of 10 public toilets by Tendring District Council has generated considerable public concern, anxiety and protest, as evidenced by the submission of 2 large petitions and a third currently being promoted on the online petition site 38 Degrees. There has not been a cost-benefit analysis or economic impact assessment of the closures, while the estimated cost savings have been calculated at £100,000 per annum. Therefore, before any toilets are closed, will Tendring District Council consult with Public Health England, local GP surgeries and local businesses via their local representatives to ask what the impact of the toilet closures would be on patient well-being and business revenue, and to bring the results of that consultation to a full council meeting and publish the results.
Thank you very much, Mr. Walker. If you'd like to turn off your microphone and return to your seat. Thank you. Councillor Skeels.
I'd like to thank Mr. Walker for his question, and I can assure him that it's with great reluctance that the decision has been made and taken to rationalise any service provision. I think it would be very difficult to undertake any meaningful cost-benefit analysis on this type of service, given the number of variables and cost dependencies involved. By way of example, it would be difficult to discount bias from some consultees, as they would have a clear interest in a specific outcome, whether that be positive or negative, such as was identified when we considered the toilets in Jaywick Sands, where those near neighbours affected by antisocial behaviour associated with the toilets had a very different view as the closure, those who were not local to that provision. What is important is to consider is that we are looking at closing those toilets which generally have a lower numbers of users, higher incidence of antisocial behaviour, higher operating costs, have alternative position and almost universally not suitable for refurbishment or enhancement. It is true to say that we are looking to enhance some facilities as part of a new strategic approach. We will explore with local businesses, both existing and new, options for public to use their facilities, and it's important that businesses recognise that they need to step up to the plate and play their part to both develop their own provision or work with the town and parish councils to take on services which they claim are vital but which the district can no longer afford to support. Thank you.
Item number 11, questions pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 11.2. Councillor Calver. You can remain seated.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With your permission, Councillor Fowler will read my question for me.
Councillor Fowler.
Thank you, Chairman. The Labour Group supports the £355 restoration of Clacton's Venetian Bridge and agrees with the portfolio holder for leisure and tourism when he described the bridge as being an iconic focal point for visitors. Will the portfolio holder agree with me that the Victorian lighthouses in Dovercourt Bay, both scheduled ancient monuments, represent an even greater iconic focal point for visitors to Harwich and Dovercourt, and therefore will he advise the Council as to what action is being taken to restore them to their former glory and how long it is likely to be before once again they offer a positive visual impact on Dovercourt Bay's blue flag beach rather than a negative one? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Skeels.
Thank you, Councillor. I would like to thank Councillor Calver for his question and appreciate his support for the restoration of the Venetian Bridge. I concur completely on the subject of the Victorian lighthouses in Dovercourt Bay, which are a key landmark for the district, an instantly recognisable feature for one of our blue flag beaches. You may recall that the condition survey of the lighthouses was commissioned earlier on this year to establish what it would take to bring the lighthouses back to their former glory. You will appreciate this is a very specialist work, and there have been a number of tasks to complete in advance to ensure the safety of the contractors prior to any survey commencing. Once the survey is complete, which is likely to be later on this year, we will have a clear picture of the condition of the lighthouses and importantly, what cost will be to restore them. At that point, we will be able to consider how we go forward in possession of all the appropriate facts. Thank you.
Councillor Calver, do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Mr. Chairman, I apologise. I thank the portfolio holder for that answer. I'm a little bit concerned that the portfolio holder has suggested that the survey will be completed later on this year, as we're only 5 weeks from the end of the year. So can you please be a little bit more specific on when this information is going to be available, please?
Councillor Skeels.
Thank you, Councillor Calver. I haven't got the answer to that question, but I can find out from the officers that are preparing to get the survey done and come back to you with the answer if that's okay. Thank you.
Question number 2 then, Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Chairman. Will the portfolio holder responsible for dealing with homelessness advise the Council of the annual number of people contacting TDC to declare themselves as homeless but who fall outside of the Council's legal obligation for assistance? Would the portfolio holder further agree to introduce a location within Harwich and Dovercourt where a person requiring such assistance can present themselves as at present such individuals, often without the means to pay for transport, are required to get to Clacton or Colchester before they can be given support?
Councillor Honeywood.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your question, Councillor Henderson. The legal obligations that the Council has towards the homeless are set out in government legislation and not policy adopted by the Council. The legislation defines homelessness, who is eligible to apply, who is owed a duty with accommodation, and how that duty can end or be ended by the Council. In 2016-17, 1,397 households approached the Housing Options Team for advice or assistance with their housing. Of this figure, 270 were assessed as being homeless or threatened with homelessness as defined in the homelessness legislation set out in Part 7 Housing Act 1996 amended. These households made formal homelessness applications to the Council. Of this figure, 270 households, 92 were accepted as being owed a full housing duty. 107 were found to be not homeless following inquiries or alternative assistance being provided. 37 were found not to have a priority need or set out in the legislation, and a further 34 were found to be intentionally homeless. Moving to the second part of your question, I can advise you that such a provision did exist until fairly recently at the Harwich Job Centre 1 day a week, but it was found that on a consistent basis only half of the booked appointments actually turned up. On this basis, the arrangement was not proving to be an effective use of officer time, so it was withdrawn. The Housing Benefits Team does, however, continue to have a presence at the Job Centre on Wednesday and Thursday each week, and anyone presenting there with a homelessness problem is phoned through to the housing options team at the Town Hall. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Henderson, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please, Chairman. And I'll give the portfolio holder an example of what I meant, and perhaps he will come back again. I'm probably talking about a situation, I think most of us councillors in here now dread that phone going off when a person is declared homeless and he doesn't meet that priority need for the council because there's nothing else out there at the moment to support him. And such a case came to me and I phoned up the office here. And he wasn't one of the chap I was dealing with wasn't one of those who met that criteria. And he was told his only option was to go to possibly the Colchester night shelter. But ring first because most of the time that's full. And if he couldn't get in there, possibly go to Chelmsford, but make sure you ring there first because you might not get in there either. But for him to get to any of those night shelters, he needed money. And I was told that he would have to come over here to Clacton to actually get a voucher, to actually get to Colchester, to actually go into a night shelter. So I would ask if he would look at the whole situation again, because the answer to that person who came to me was actually just, you're going to have to live on the streets because there's no other provision for you if those other places are full. Could I ask one second part of the question? We all know the impact of the rollout of the universal credits having on people and families around this country. Particularly, it will have an impact on people in Tendring. Can I have an assurance off of him that if contacted by people who are threatened to be evicted because of being forced into arrears by this government's nasty and painful introduction of that universal credit, will his officers and this council do all they can to support those individuals at that hour of need?
Councillor Hollywood.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson, for your supplementary. In answer to the first part, yes, I'm happy to look at that. And if your resident still has issues, if you would like to forward me the details, I'm happy to see what we can do to help with that as well. In answer to the future, I'm going to be frank. There has been a slight rise in rent arrears of this council, something that I have raised with housing officers. It is believed that the main issue is around universal credit, where there is a delay in receiving the rent from the claimant, given the delay in the money being paid. However, I'm being told that the universal credit situation is likely to stabilise. But I'd also like to say to Councillor Henderson and other councillors that we do have a hardship policy in place that is coming up later in the agenda under the local council tax support scheme, which is proving quite effective. But yes, we will do what we can to help our residents. I think that's the right thing to do, and I think, as Councillor Henderson knows, if anything, I believe in putting local people first. That's my thing, and that's what we'll try and do. Thank you.
Thank you. Question number 3, Councillor Parsons.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Could the portfolio holder for health and education update this chamber on the work that has been carried out by this council to raise awareness of, as well as the work to support, the services that deal with mental health within our district? In addition, could she comment on the work that the council has done to promote World Mental Health Day and the hashtag Hello Yellow campaign?
Councillor McWilliams.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Parsons, for raising this issue, as it is an area which the Council has been very proactive in driving forward in its community leadership partnership role. And I would like to take the opportunity to thank all councillors who have contributed to the different initiatives aimed at helping those with mental health problems. Mental health has been identified as a key priority for the Council's Local Health and Wellbeing Board, which seeks to focus on key health issues that affect our area by bringing together partners and agencies to focus on health concerns, especially where we are not the lead authority. A key project developed through the board is the Mental Health Hub. This is operated by Citizen Advice, Tendring, and seeks to provide mental health support and stop mental health issues escalating for individual clients. In addition, support is offered around financial issues, housing, volunteering opportunities, isolation, parenting and physical health. Over 130 new clients were seen in the second half of 2016-17, providing holistic assessments of their mental health need and, where required, signposting clients into the mental health caseworker service. The hub is based on Old Road in a very significant area of deprivation for those with mental health issues, and so is ideally suited for the clients to be able to pop in to share their struggles. Funding is provided by a number of organisations, including Tendring District Council, Essex County Council, the Clinical Commissioning Group, and the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner's Office. All these agencies understand the needs in this area and the impact those with mental health can have on the public sector, and so are keen to develop ways to assist in terms of prevention. This initiative is seen as providing significant support for those with mental health difficulties, and wider partners are hoping to upscale this project into a county-wide initiative. Another inspirational project the Council has been involved in is a Wellbeing Hub pilot, which has also been explored through the Local Health and Wellbeing Board and has been set up at Great Bentley Primary School. This has been supported by the Council's Executive Projects Officer, who, following attendance at the instructor training for youth mental first aid provided by Mental Health First Aid England, delivered training to the staff at Great Bentley Primary School to support them in the valuable work they are doing. The hub launched in April 2017 and is crucial in assisting young people, as mental health affects all aspects of a child's development, including cognitive abilities, social skills and emotional well-being. Following evaluation and subject to identifying additional funding, the Wellbeing Hub model and training may be able to be cascaded through the clusters to enable other schools to be able to facilitate their own individual wellbeing hub. This has also attracted county-wide interest. The Council is looking to sign up to the Time to Change campaign, which would demonstrate the Council's commitment to change how it thinks and acts in terms of mental health in the workplace. This would include mental health first aid training for staff and support, as well as developing staff-focused activities and events as part of a holistic plan of action to better prepare, inform and support staff. The Council has also promoted information to staff on World Mental Health Day via our online portal and the HR committee, which was the 1st of November, which agreed to support the Council's commitment to the Time of Change agenda. Thank you.
Councillor Parsons, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank Councillor McWilliams for that very detailed answer to my question. But I do have a couple of questions that wasn't raised in your report, if I can raise those. A number of documents have been sent through the Essex Health and Wellbeing Board with regards to mental health. In particular, sorry, just bear me 1 second. In particular, the strategy for mental health and wellbeing for 2017 to 21, the Southend, Essex and Thurrock Dementia Strategy Report, and the Open Up, Reach Out Children's Mental Health Local Transformation Plan, as well as that, the prevention strategy for reducing the number of admissions into hospitals, and the suicide...
Councillor Parsons, there's no question here.
It will be.
Can you furnish us with the question, please? Otherwise I'll cut you short.
And the suicide prevention strategy report. I just wondered what the council was doing to assist with the implementation of these strategies. Thank you.
Councillor McWilliams.
We are already looking at one of the main strategies for our own benefit, obviously. As far as the other ones are concerned, I will actually have to look into that, Councillor, and just see what there is. So please bear with me and I'll come back to you on it.
Question number 4, Councillor Winfield.
Thank you, Chairman. To Mixed Skills, it's Mixed Skills Senior, Portfolio Holder for Leisure and Tourism. The recent Cycle Tour of Britain event enthused people to take up cycling. That is until they realised that they would have to share the road with heavy traffic emitting pollutants, stealing their health and enjoyment of the sport. The existing unsatisfactory system that forces cyclists and pedestrians to share the top promenade on Clacton seafront fails to please either group and is clearly just a token gesture. Sustrains is a national cycling organisation funded by the government, whose job it is to provide designated cycling paths for towns like ours. This organisation has even allotted a token number of 150 which appears on their maps and which are supposed to have cycling routes along them. I would like to ask the portfolio holder for Leisure and Tourism, will he do all he can to achieve safe, designated cycle routes from Clacton Station and along our seafront from Holland Haven to the town centre? Thank you.
Councillor Skills.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Councillor Winfield for his question, and I agree that cycling in the district appears to be growing rapidly. I'm pleased to let you know that my officers are working with county-wide partners, including Sustrans and Essex County Council, on the production of cycling strategy programme. Although it's at an early stage, we will continue to influence this important piece of work for the benefit of our residents. I would also add that when we have the strategy in place, we will also look at the physical changes which will be required to enable us to fully implement the strategy. I am sure that this will probably include a review of the use of the area raised by Councillor Winfield. We will continue to work with all of our partners to improve access to cycling right across the district. And if you would like to discuss this specific matter further with me, I'd welcome the opportunity to come along and meet with me and the officers in the near future.
Councillor Winfield, do you have a supplementary?
I thank Councillor Skills for his welcome support and look forward to hearing about any progress with this request, which I know will please residents of all ages. Thank you.
No question. Item number 12, report of the Leader of the Council. No such report on this occasion. Item number 13, report submitted to the Council by an Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Councillor Baker.
Yes. And I thought it was me. Thank you, Chairman. As you will recall, a motion was put forward back in May by Councillor Parsons with regard to a community governance review, a town council for Clacton-on-Sea. I don't intend to read out the whole motion, but it's there on page 27 and 28. You referred that to the Community Leadership and Partnerships Committee, and we considered his motion at its meeting on the 10th of July. It was going to be considered at our last meeting, the 5th of September, was deferred to today. Following discussion of the motion by the Community Leadership and Partnerships Committee, it was resolved that it recommended that Council supports the motion as written, except that the legislation referred to therein be amended as shown on page 28, and the recommendation is that Council decides whether it wishes to support Councillor Parsons' motion. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any member wish to speak on this? Councillor Parsons.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And thank you, Councillor Baker, for bringing that to this council. The question here isn't whether we want to have a Clacton Town Council or not. This is what I said at the Community Leadership and Partnerships Committee. It's whether or not we actually want the members of the public to decide whether they want to have a Clacton Town Council or not and have their say on whether they want one. So I know from previous experience that this has invoked quite a lot of passionate debate with lots of opinions, both for and against. But I'd like to ask members to just bear in mind that actually we're not deciding whether we want a Clacton Town Council or not this evening. All we're doing is deciding whether members of the public have their say or not. And if you can indulge me, Chairman, I just wanted to say a very big thank you for everyone's consideration and kindness with regards to the last council meeting. It's proof that my partner will stop at nothing to stop me from talking, although I have been reliably informed that if she finds any of our meetings dull in the future, she'll display her opinions in a more...
Let's stick with the matters at hand.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Councillor Buke.
Thank you, Chairman. Echoing what Councillor Parsons just said, yes, we are here tonight to discuss and to support, I hope, a motion to consult the people of Clacton as to whether they want a council or not. Members, most or some members in the chamber will understand that I've been wanting to do this for a long time. I haven't had many supporters during that time, but I think we've reached a point now where the tide has changed. Chairman, we have in Tendring 27 town and parish councils. Many members sitting around the chamber today are members of those councils. That was me again, I'm sorry. Many members are around the chamber are members of those parish councils, and indeed one or two of us are chairmen or mayors, whatever. How often do we hear discuss, promote and agree improvements for Clacton Town rather than the wider district? Not very often, I suggest. In 1974, we're well aware that Town Council existed for Clacton, but it was lost in the government reorganisation in 1974. I remember that era very well, having known Clacton since I was a youngster, born in fact. In 1977, a certain citizen, Wolfie Smith, said, "Power to the people." Citizen Jack Parsons and I are now putting this motion before you to consider as to whether we promote the formation of a council to Clacton people. I have found it somewhat astonishing that members on both sides of the chamber have expressed objection to having a Clacton Town Council. It's very surprising, I have to say, because, as I've mentioned, the leader himself is chairman of his own parish council. I am town mayor of another one, and I guess if we ask all those 27 parish councils and town councils residents if they wanted to give up and not have their parish council, there wouldn't be any coming forward. I'd put money on that. I think we all cherish and work our parish councils to maximum effect. Councillor Honeywood also has expressed objection to having a council, and this is before consultation. Even our MP, Giles Watling MP, has expressed objection to having a town council, bearing in mind that these people are in high office representing the people of Clacton and the district. But Councillor Gary Scott, I know, supports having a council, but in this case we're just consulting at the moment. The Police and Crime Commissioner, Roger Hurst, says that parish areas experience lower crime rates and that it was a shame that more areas in Essex were not parished. The committee, as we've heard, supports the motion to consult the public with a view to creating a town council for Clacton to come into effect in 2023. The Local Government Association supports new councils, and amongst those that have been formed in the last year or two include Sutton Coldfield, Bingley, as in Bradford End, Lowestoft, Kidderminster, Swindon, Badgers Mount, and more recently the National Association of Local Councils has supported the formation of a Bexhill Town Council. And if I can find it quickly, I'll find a quote on that front. If I can't, I shall move on. Here it is. New Bexhill Town Council moves one step closer. And finally it says, this is from the NALC, in addition to comedian Eddie Izzard's support for new Town Council for Bexhill, 94% of residents also favour this option in the consultation as part of the current community governance review. Rother District Council steering group overseeing the review met yesterday to consider the results, though there is still some way to go with a decision expected by full council on the 18th of December. The campaign group, which includes the Game of Thrones actor, Apply, ably supported by the Sussex and Surrey County Associations, as well as ourselves, gave an excellent and well-received talk on progress at the networking event held at the annual conference last week, so keep your fingers crossed. So that's the most recent one that I'm aware of. So, those members that have said to me they don't want to impose a council on Clacton or foist it upon them, as I've most recently heard, let's not impose or foist a council on the people of Clacton, but consult them. Let's consult with a forward-looking view to catch up and keep up with the rest of the country and not get left behind in representation of Tendring residents, Clacton residents in particular. Let's apply devolution and localism to what we care about here in Clacton. Please support Tendring's biggest town and restore lost power to the people of Clacton. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Everett.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to propose that the question be now put.
Councillor Everett, on this occasion I have a list here of 3 other members that have indicated to speak. So I'm going to overrule. So if you have nothing further to add, Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to say that in general I'm in favour of local democracy and local people having their say. The difficulty I have on this is that on numerous Westminster elections, county council elections, and on a European referendum election, I haven't heard anybody in my particular area of Clacton waxing lyrically about the need for a yet more local elected representation, or the fact that they think we need a Clacton Town Council. That doesn't mean that it's not popular, it just means no one's mentioned it. The real concern I have with all of this is we already have one MP, some county councillors and district councillors, and for at least a little while longer some MEPs, though thankfully we won't be having them for much longer. Do we really need any more representation? A little while ago this council decided in its infinite wisdom that we didn't need district councillors and was looking to reduce the number to 48. A few months later we now decide that what we actually need is in fact a whole new tier of local government and at least one parish council for Clacton. In fact, it will probably be 3 parish councils for Clacton because if you look at the size of the town, Holland and Jowick are going to be swallowed up and we in fact wouldn't have a say. And I would imagine that if I was sitting there in Holland-on-Sea or Jowick, I would be looking at the whole Clacton Council thing and thinking our representatives are going to be lost in this, what would be the point of turning up? So it would be my view that if you had a proper parish council for Clacton, you'd actually need one separate for Holland-on-Sea and Jowick as well as Clacton because they're all totally different communities, would need proper representation if we really believe truly in local democracy. But it seems that once again what we're deciding is big is beautiful, large is great, and if you're on the peripheries or you belong to a small community, don't worry because we're all going to be lumped into the whole, well your voice will once again be totally ignored. The other real concern I have on this is that we have another consultation. Well, unfortunately, for those of us that have been here for some time, consultations come and go, and sometimes, as in the case of street lights in my ward, what people actually said they wanted in the consultation is not what they got. I worry when local authorities give people the opportunity for consultations because they're not really that binding and they don't really have to take any notice of them. The real concern that I have is that when we actually look at page 185, we read that Clacton Town Partnership responded that they were fully supportive of a Clacton Town Council. No other comments in support of a Clacton Town Council were received, but neither were there any objections. So we have in fact one organisation that's decided in their infinite wisdom that the whole of Clacton ought to have another tier of local government. You know, I would really want to see some evidence that the people in my ward and the people of Clacton are supporting with this. Because let's be honest, if we go down the road of this wonderful democracy, then they're going to be stuck with it for years, decades. And also they're going to be asked to pay for it. They're going to be asked to pay the expenses of anything from maybe 10 to another 30 local representatives, plus officer support, plus officer paperwork, plus a whole tier of other bureaucracy that will come to the district council and then to the county council, as we'll discuss the same thing yet again, and the residents of Tendring are expected to pay for it, especially the residents of Clacton. We've managed so far, do we actually need one? My view is this: if we are really serious about asking the people of Clacton and Holland-on-Sea and Jaywick if they really want this, then the year after next we have local elections where everybody gets a ballot paper. If we're really interested in local democracy and we really want to go down that route, why not in those elections for Clacton, Holland and Jaywick, don't we put a ballot paper in there with it? With a simple question: do you want a parish council, yes or no? That way we can have real democracy, everyone has the opportunity to vote, and there'll be no question on whether or not anyone wants it or not. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Councillor Honeywood.
Thank you, Chairman. Just made a few notes while I've been listening to the talk. The first thing that was said is, the question isn't whether we want a town council or not. Well, having read the paperwork, yes it is. That's exactly what we're saying. What we're saying is we've had an informal consultation in which Clacton's response has not even mounted to a whisper of interest. So now we're going to spend taxpayers' money to go out and ask the question. Really? I'm sorry, I can't support that. What I find interesting is Councillor Buke, who sits on a neighbouring town council, wanting to impose a town council on Clacton and Jaywick and Holland. Perhaps this is just a thought.
Carry on,
Perhaps Councillor Buke would like to come up with a different motion that asks the residents of Frinton and Walton whether they still want a town council or not. Just a thought. If Councillor Buke wants to do that, I'll be happy to support him. But as far as Clacton goes, I've not had any responses from people saying to me what a great idea it would be to pay extra tax so we can have a town council. And the same has been said in Jaywick, where I'm a county councillor. So I'm sorry, I can't support the implementation or the imposing, I think is a better way of saying it, imposing a town council on Clacton. Thank you.
Councillor Miles.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I want to come to this in response to Councillor Buke, because I am both a town councillor, Frinton and Walton town councillor, as well as sitting here as a district councillor. And I want to just spend a couple of minutes telling you about my experience as a town councillor. It has been the most frustrating, most demoralising, most shameful experience that I've had in many a year. It is not at all democratic. Year on year at the annual general meeting, I raise the same question every single year, and that is that district councils and county councils have Widdicombe rules where you have cross-representation of parties on a pro rata basis. And if it's good enough for higher authorities, it should be good enough for Frinton and Wharton Town Council. For the last 6 years, that has been absolutely refused. This year is the first year that we've ever been allowed to sit on a committee. And that's because it's a new committee that's been formed, and I guess they haven't had the expertise, so I've been very glad to have our experience brought to the table. But it's a working party, it's not a committee. I would say to Frinton and Wharton residents, and I would say the same to Clacton, think carefully about this, because this costs me and thousands of other Frinton and Wharton residents extra council tax because of the precept. I'm not convinced personally that I get value for money. In fact, I know I don't. And it's only right and proper. This is not attacking Councillor Buke as mayor at all. I think he's being a very fair and efficient mayor, and I want to acknowledge that publicly. But as for the council itself and the way it conducts itself, it is totally and utterly ignoring the democratic wishes of the Frinton and Wharton residents by refusing all opposition councillors to participate on official committees and to make decisions. So I would really caution, and I would endorse what Councillor Griffiths has said. It's another tier of expensive bureaucracy. I cannot possibly see the gain from it as a resident who contributes towards the cost of that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Stock.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Councillor Buke was quoting me and my opinions and the fact that I'm chairman of Little Bromley Parish Council, and indeed I am. That is a fact. The population of Little Bromley, last time I checked, was 216 residents. And, and if Clacton had parish councils that size, you'd probably have about 250, 300 different town or parish councils across Clacton covering the area. And he suggested that I wouldn't want to lose my position as chairman of the parish council. I'd be delighted, more than happy, to lose my position as chairman of the parish council and to lose the parish council. And indeed, as chairman, I have put it to the parish council itself and to members of the public who attend the meetings that we should consider whether it's the right thing to do to have a parish council. Is it a right and appropriate use of resources, just our time, let alone the financial cost to the residents of the parish? Whether we should simply not have one at all, whether we should seek to merge with a bigger neighbouring parish to get the economies of scale that you get with a larger parish. And it's a very healthy thing to do. My views on the Clacton Town Council, I articulated them briefly on the item before this item that we never got to at the last council meeting, was simply this, that no one, apart from Councillor Buke, who has been consistent on the issue, I will grant him that, no one I can recall ever has suggested it's a good idea. As Councillor Griffith said, no one brings it up on the doorstep. We've had a consultation exercise where one organisation and one organisation alone has said, yeah, it's a good idea. And that's it. If people were clamouring for there to be a town council in Clacton, fine, I'd be happy to support it. I'm not one to suppress democracy. However, there clearly isn't a clamour to have it. And if there was going to be a town council for Clacton, surely it would be the town of Clacton. Why are we lumping in Holland-on-Sea and Jaywick and everywhere that isn't currently parished into one homogenous, urbanised kind of area, when those people see themselves as living in very different and distinct communities? We're seeing that in other communities across the patch. If you try and merge places together, they don't like it. And whatever Councillor Buke says, and Councillor Parsons said in their opening words, the motion before us is to impose a town council on the whole of Clacton, Jaywick included, and Holland-on-Sea included, to carve it up into different wards within, but to impose a town council on the whole of that area. That is the motion before us, whether you like it or not. And I strongly object to it because there's no support for it locally that I've ever heard of. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Bray.
Thank you, Chairman. Normally I would willingly support anything that improves localism, but this just seems to have been badly thought out. You have a large area including Clacton, Holland and Jaywick, and as has been said before, one town council trying to look after that large area simply wouldn't work. That's the first problem. The second problem is we've just spent a great deal of time reducing our council numbers down from 60 to 48 to reduce the local governance, and we now seem to want to replace that with a town council which could be, 20, 30, 40, who knows, extra people. It's been touched on that this won't be free. The people of Clacton will be paying for this in a precept on their council tax. That will happen, and I'm not sure that should be happening either. There's also the concern that town councils are becoming increasingly political. I think in this council we try hard not to be, and hopefully they would too, but there is the issue that they could be. And political councils at that level, in my opinion, aren't necessarily helpful to the local populace. So I think there are several reasons why this is not a good idea. As for the suggestion that it isn't being imposed, that's extremely arguable. I happen to think that it does appear to being imposed. Consultations, wonderful, but let's be honest, only certain people answer consultations, and if you can get a large enough number of your people one way or the other to do it, you can completely influence it. It is unlikely that all of the people would actually have a say, because many simply wouldn't bother. So I'm not sure that's necessarily helpful either. But most of all, my biggest single problem with this is that I do not represent the Clacton ward. And as somebody who doesn't represent the Clacton ward, I do not feel that I morally have the right to impose a town council on Clacton. And as I said before, let's remember that imposing a town council on Clacton would mean imposing a precept, a higher level of council tax. I'm not a Clacton councillor, and I'm not prepared to impose that on the people of Clacton. I'm quite sure also that given the amount of time this has been under discussion, many councillors will have spoken to people they know in and around the Clacton area. I've lived in the area for near 40 years. I know lots of people in Clacton, and by lots I can go into hundreds. I haven't spoken to them all, that would be ridiculous. But I have broached the subject with quite a few, and I have yet to hear a positive comment. Nobody seems to want it or be interested in it. And the second you tell them that their council tax will go up as a result, I think you might find they won't be best pleased. I can't support this. As a non-Clacton councillor, it would be morally wrong for me to do so. And I think I've given several reasons as to why I don't think it's a very good idea. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. If I may, Councillor Bucher has asked for a point of order. There is no such thing in the Constitution as a point of order. However, under 16.4 little f, there is a point of personal explanation. If Councillor Bucher has a specific point of personal explanation, not continuing in terms of the debate but on personal explanation, he is allowed to do so. Otherwise, he has spoken on this motion already and therefore is not allowed to do so.
Councillor Bleak, do you feel you qualify under that rule?
Well, I'll leave you to tell me that, Chairman. In the belief that I've heard some lies and misinformation, I'd really like to ask the monitoring officer whether the motion is actually a motion to impose it on Clacton. My belief is that it is not.
On page 27, at the bottom, in italics, that was the wording of the motion. It starts by saying, in accordance with the legislation and the statutory guidance, the council, so in accordance with the legislation and guidance, conducts a community governance review. Then it talks about part of that review will include consultation with members, with members of the public. So therefore, the first part is that the council would be deciding to commence a community governance review, which includes consultation.
May I just say thank you, Chairman, so that doesn't impose it on Clacton. Thank you.
Councillor Calver.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. And firstly, Mr. Chairman, may I thank you for not allowing Councillor Everett to stifle debate in the manner that he attempted to. I think he was very disrespectful to this council. There's been a few points put tonight which I do believe, whilst they might exist on certain councils, I believe to a degree have been scaremongering. The point that Councillor Miles raised about Frinton and Walton Town Council, if that is an accurate picture of the Town Council, I think we would have sympathy with her point. But I would just like to point out that Harwich Town Council actually, through choice, runs under Whittingham. And we ensure a fair balance of all political parties on all committees and try to work by consensus. So I wouldn't want people to think that just because it might not be working very well on one council, that is a reason not to have another council. Likewise, there has been many mentions of the fact that council tax will go up and you'll have to pay all this money. Well, may I say that at present, a Band D household in Harwich pays 63 pence per week for Harwich Town Council. Now, I don't think that is going to break the bank, and I believe the services and support that Harwich Town Council gives to the residents of Harwich and Dovercourt is incredibly good value for money for that 63 pence a week. I think the residents of Clacton would benefit from a town council, but I certainly do not think they should be denied the opportunity to say whether or not they wish to have a town council. And on that basis, I personally will certainly be supporting the call for a consultation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Calver. I've got two more members to speak, and then I'm going to wrap this up because I think we've had a fair debate on it. Councillor Talbot.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm really puzzled as to where we're going on this. The only reason we're discussing it is because a member's put forward a motion, which he's totally entitled to do. But he ought to decide himself, is that going to be the best way to solve the problem he wants? If people want a parish council or a town council, there will be a groundswell of opinion locally, and a local organisation will pick that up and have a petition round their own area. And that petition is then presented to this council. And we have to make our mind up, as we did in 2006 when we had the petition from Jaywick, as to whether we were going to support their application to become a parish. Those of you, and there's quite a few members round here who were councillors then, will remember that this council wrote to John Prescott, who was the minister, and asked the minister to make Jaywick a parish so that it could have a parish council. The minister actually agreed, but when he agreed, another group of residents in Jaywick got together equally as strongly and opposed the fact that a parish had been proposed. So we went all the way back to the minister and asked the minister if he'd be good enough to change his mind. But the feeling's got to come from the people who live in the area and not from somebody above them going around asking them all sorts of questions. In 2003, when I was chairman of St Osoph Council, there were 6 meetings held between Great Holland, or Holland, Clacton and Jaywick in Clacton, and I was only invited along to be able to give an input into those meetings as to what the advantages of having a parish council were. I don't agree with the cost implications that some people mention, and if anybody's interested, in my bag I have all the council statements from 1999 onwards, and you can compare your council with anyone else and see whether it's any dearer than the unparished area of Clacton. I can assure you can't pick it out that way. But all I would say is I think we're doing it the wrong way. I don't actually support the council organising a consultation, whether that's right or wrong or not. The proper way to do this is for the people in those areas, the people in Holland that feel that they're missing out in some way, that there's a level of consultation that they can't have, or people in Jaywick or people in Clacton. They should have the right to be able to ask through their members for them to organise a survey and see if they do want a council of their own or not, and it's not for us to do it.
Councillor Talbot, there must be a lot of weight in your bag there. Councillor Stevenson, last to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. It will be no surprise that I'm actually very much in support of giving the residents of Clacton the opportunity to decide whether they want a town council or not. It's been 40 years since they've been given that opportunity, and it seems like it's going to be a few more before they get that opportunity again. When we talk about how the residents have not responded, I would argue that the publicity hasn't been great. If you don't read the newspaper, then you probably didn't know about this in the first place. But if you then go to the community governance review, there was only a small proportion of people who replied in general, in total. And of those, most of those were parish and town councils, strangely enough. But there are advantages to having town and parish councils. Lawford and Frinton had their own PCSOs. Harwich has used its funds to seed fund many, many things. And I think when we talk about the size of what is to be, that is to be determined and cannot be decided right now. And there's only scaremongering about how big it might be. May I suggest it'll only be 5? There you go. It'll be very small. The council tax, as we've already heard, depends on the cost. And the cost is to be determined yet again. Harwich, as you just heard, 63p. But the biggest thing, and coming back to some of the people who say there should have been a bigger groundswell, well, perhaps I would argue that parish and town councils bring around that groundswell. They bring the community together. And it would be, for instance, the opposition to planning on a local plan that Little Clacton and Wheely fought, to use an example, where we had a petition of over 1,000 people from a village that's only got 3 or 4. So these are the reasons I am totally in favour for it, and I'd ask my colleagues if they would also support this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the monitoring officer just to clarify something before we go to the vote.
In response to Councillor Buke's question earlier, he asked if we were consulting with the public. And I said, yes, we were consulting with the public. But I did say before that the motion was to decide whether to commence a community governance review. But I think it's important for members to read the whole the complete wording of the motion. Because it says, again, on the bottom of page 27, that during the review, the Council will consult with members of the public and other stakeholders as to the creation of a Clacton Town Council, which will be intended to serve the areas of Clacton-on-Sea that are not currently represented by a town or parish council. This will be inclusive of the following current wards. And then there are a number of wards listed. And it finishes off with, in addition, this council will authorise officers to, with regard to the above aforementioned guidance acts, draft potential boundaries within the specification above, potentially through a working party for full council approval prior to public consultation. So it is the wording of that motion that you are voting on.
Thank you for that. Councillor Baker.
Sorry.
And I thought it was me again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very briefly, I've just reread, and we're going to be discussing it possibly later on, page 195. We resolved on the 5th of September, and I'll quote it. Council resolved in principle a wider community governance review of parished and unparished areas in the Tendring district be supported subject to specific terms of reference having regard to the initial views which are currently being sought coming to a future meeting of the Council for agreement. I think we've already agreed that the unparished areas are going to be reviewed. So this motion has been almost overruled, I would say, and I do understand, and if I recall, Councillor Parsons, correct me if I'm wrong, you actually stated that you would potentially withdraw this motion, although Councillor Butte was against that. That's all I'd like to say, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
So we take it to the vote. All those for the motion? Thank you. All those against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Item number 14. So the motion falls. I thought that was obvious. Fair enough. My apologies, Councillor Calvin. My apologies. Item number 14, minutes of the committee.
Chairman, if I may, with the indulgence of the members, I'll attempt to move all of them on block, subject to the notes 1 and 2 there that state that the recommendations to Council contained in the minutes of the Standards Committee and the Human Resources Committee will be presented for members' consideration with a covering report to the meeting of the Council to be held in January. So there are 2 recommendations in the Standards and the HR minutes, but we're not taking them tonight. We're taking them in January. So I'd like to move those minutes, Chairman.
Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Chair. There's just one item on page 60, and it's on the Corporate Management Committee, and I just want to ask the Chairman, has he had discussions with the portfolio holder responsible for Carros now, who's actually given us assurances that no community group will be forced out, rationalised or whatever, out of those community centres or community facilities that they actually are responsible for, and also that there will be no review of the existing Carros scheme, which benefits lots and lots of our community assets around this district, which are essential to the future of the residents that actually use them.
Councillor Steady.
Thank you. Thank you, Ivan, for your question. No, I've not had a conversation with the portfolio holder at the moment, but I would just like to expand a little bit on the suggestion what we made. I was a little bit late tonight, and I think I came in at the end of sports facilities, sports grants, and one of the questions I think was, how do you encourage people to become involved? I think the view is, certainly the comment I made at the corporate management was very simple example. 2 examples really. One, if a community association would like to take on the freehold, so they would have the destiny in their own hands of that facility to purchase it from the council. And then the other one was the basic idea that if you've got a facility which is worth £1 million, would it not make sense to sell that for £1 million? The council keeps $500,000 for whatever to invest. Then the other $500,000 is used to either relocate the club on that area, where they would move to a new facility with state-of-the-art facilities. That way you'd have better facilities for people to become involved. And I say this really from my own experience, because I've been involved over the years with football clubs, cricket clubs, golf clubs and bowls clubs, and I know how difficult it is for clubs to actually maintain and improve their facilities for the community. So whilst it can be negatively looked at and said, you're trying to force clubs out, on the positive side, it could be a way of regenerating those clubs, improving the facilities, and therefore encouraging people of all ages to use those facilities. Thank you very much.
Okay, so all those agreed with the minutes of the meetings? Agreed? Thank you. Item number 15, motions to council. There are none on this occasion. Item number 16, recommendations from Cabinet. The Local Council Tax Support Scheme. Councillor Honeywood.
Thank you, Chairman. The report sets out the proposed local tax support scheme, council tax hardship scheme, council tax discounts and the minimum revenue provision policy statement for 2018-19. As you can see, no changes to any of these 4 items are proposed for 2018-19, so they are being recommended to continue at present. In respect of the local council tax support scheme, providing the same level of financial support as the existing scheme at 80% will provide certainty and stability to Tendring residents during a period where there may be changes to other support they receive through the various welfare reforms being rolled out by the government, such as universal credit. In respect of the hardship policy, the changes made last year has meant increased support being available to residents, a trend that is expected to continue over the remainder of the year. All of the items set out in the report will remain under review as part of a long-term financial stability plan and 10-year forecast, with any future changes set against the challenging financial position faced by the Council over the coming years. Chairman, I would like to move the recommendation as written. Had a Freudian slip there.
Thank you, Councillor Honeywood. Councillor Parsons.
Councillor, can I just clarify that that's the recommendation to Council as on page 75 as opposed to on the report? Thank you.
Correct.
Councillor Parsons.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm not sure if it needs a seconder. Does it need a seconder? No? Okay, brilliant. Wonderful. I'd just like to give credit where credit's due, really. I think in this current climate of financial difficulty, where all the purse strings are being squeezed, it is extremely comforting that we still have the ability to help those that need help. I'm extremely pleased that the level of support that we are able to offer is unchanged. So I'll be fully supporting this. Thank you.
Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'm pleased that the report under the risks side of things on page 81 does recognise the impact of the government's benefit cap and the welfare reforms as having on individuals within the district. And also, I do welcome that we're not making things even worse for those people who are actually struggling to manage from week to week actually in this district. I'm looking at the hardship fund scheme in page 79 in 2016-17, 27 applications. I just wonder, because it does seem that we're in really, really hard times. Everybody knows things are, the areas of deprivation throughout this district are going up. We've just had a new release of data which is showing things are steadily getting worse. I just wonder if the public actually know, and we are actually advertising enough that we have got this support available if they need it. Because I just think with 27 people throughout that year, when we know how hard people are finding it to manage, it just seems a small number, and I just think that perhaps people are struggling without even knowing that there is support there if they need it.
Councillor Talbot.
Thank you, Chairman. I must be consistent. Every time when this has come up, from when it was introduced in 2013-14 by the government as a way of saving them money and transferring the expense to local authorities, that's what the whole thing's all about. When that came up, I was a member of the opposition at that time, before 2015, and I objected strongly to the fact that the government gave principal authorities a sum of money to compensate town and parish councils for the devaluation of their penny rate product. In other words, the mere introduction of local council tax reduced the value of every town and parish's precept without them literally having to raise it. Karen was our finance officer at the time, and she sent round very detailed and useful descriptions, which I know a number of clerks have still got today. But the fact is, we stopped, I believe at that time, 20% of the money that should have gone to parish and town councils and kept it ourselves. Fair enough. The argument was, we're all suffering. The money is given into our rate support grant, and it's £40.3 million to all the authorities. It's given as part of our rate support grant, but not ring-fenced. In other words, it's just added to the rate support grant for the council to deal with in terms of how it distributes it. Now, I've got figures here, they're not from my head, but it so happens this is an item on a meeting that we're putting to the Minister on Thursday about local council tax and how that's going. But just out of interest, the 40.5 million in the first year, then those parishes, most of it was passed on, but £39 million was passed on, and as you can see, £1.5 million was kept back. We were one of those authorities keeping that money back. In the next year, £39 million was passed on, then £31 million, £29.8 million, all reductions from the 40 million that should have been going to towns and parishes, where various authorities decided, no, we're in a difficult financial position and this is something that we can use. All I'm saying is, I should vote for it. I believe in collective responsibility. I'm a member of the Cabinet. I've been a member of the Council each time it's been discussed. But every time it's been discussed, I've wanted to remind members that some authorities in the country, the vast majority, pay the whole of that money to their towns and parishes, but Tendring has consistently retained some of it because of its own financial problems. Nothing wrong with that. That's democracy. That's how it works. But I think the first year it was 20%, then 10%, then 5% or something. So it's not an enormous sum of money, but it's the principle that was decided in 2014 that is being carried forward today, and we're talking about it in 2017. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillors. Ivan touched on it a little bit, but I just want to know, maybe the officers be able to answer this, is whether we inform people properly, whether when we send the council tax bills out, is there guidance and advice and a helpline or a pamphlet within that, so people are made aware of this. So if people do fall on bad times, and it is, people do fall on bad times, big time, I think it's right as a local authority to have sort of a safe net for our residents in our district. And I was wondering whether the officer, Mr Napper or Mr Davison, be able to tell me whether there is any advice or help, pamphlets, literature that goes out with the council tax bills, and whether the local CAB have the same information and pamphlets at their offices, libraries, about assistance and help for people who may come down on for bad times. So this is important, and I think it's important that we inform our residents, and I think it's important that we give people the information, because as I hazard a guess, in years to come, people could claim money, get help, and I would say that probably would go up. I'm not saying that people will do it, but it gives people the option to seek help and assistance. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Broderick.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I'm a ward councillor for an area that's got a lot of old age pensioners in it who rely on council tax benefit, and I'm really pleased that the council is able to offer such help that it does. And the burden, of course, lies with the people who actually pay council tax. My council tax bill is £2,250 a year, and I've got a small private pension, but I have to pay, and I'm glad to pay for my neighbours who can't afford it. People who are over 65 have worked all their life, and they've paid taxes all their life. And if we can't give them help now, when can we give them help? Actually is a bit linked to the last question, because in this area I understand there is only 2/3 of the people who actually have to pay council tax, which puts quite a burden, an additional burden on those who do pay. But at the same time we want to support those who don't, and I think the council's got the balance just about right, and I'm pleased to hear it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Honeywood.
Thank you, Chairman. I've made a few notes as we've gone along, which I'd like to respond to. For Councillor Henderson, I noticed there is a slight rise in applications, And there also has been an increase in the money actually being spent within the policy. I am aware of the issues, as I said in my initial report, and I have raised with officers concerns for the future. And I've put it came up on my radar. When I raised it with them, they were aware, because they instantly came back with the same thoughts. So we are watching that quite closely. Personally, I think universal credit is a good idea, but it needs to be seen through a bumpy stage. That's my personal view. That being said, I don't get say over whether it is or isn't introduced, but what we need to do is look after our residents to the best of our ability. To Michael, I've only got a short one. Michael, I've got every sympathy for you, but that's all I can say. To Councillor Scott and Broderick, I'm not aware of literature going out with the council tax letters, but I'm not sure that that's the answer, because we'd start printing masses of literature to people who basically wouldn't need it. So are we spending money just to create more recycling? I'm not sure. Thank you. Obviously, I'd like to move as we are. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, members, take it to the vote. So all those in favour of the recommendations? Any against? Any abstentions? That's carried. Thank you very much. Item number 17, recommendation from Cabinet. Councillor Stock.
Is it me? Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. I would like to move the recommendation on the bottom of page 123. This is a rather procedural item. I can't pretend this is particularly sexy or interesting even, but it's what is interesting actually is that we have taken on board previous criticisms and concerns, particularly from Councillor Talbot, who we always listen to. If you turn to page 154, example, you will see there an example of the changes to the Constitution, and you can clearly see what has been changed. You can see words that have been added, the words that have been taken out, and the words that are remaining as they were previously. I think that it's... I don't think that can be improved upon, actually, in terms of transparency. Because if you simply get presented with a constitution that's been changed, even if you've got the old constitution next to it, it's incredibly difficult. It really is incredibly difficult to try and figure out the subtleties. Now, these are all very technical and procedural changes as a result of legislation, etc. I'll move the recommendation on the bottom of page 123, and I commend it to Council. Thank you.
Okay, no indications to speak, so we'll take that straight to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Any against? Agreed. Thank you very much. Item number 18, report of the Chief Executive, A2.
Thank you, Chairman. My report is as per pages 177 and 178, and for purely for information, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 19, report of the Chief Executive, A3. Councillor Stock.
Happy to move that, Chairman, and thank all the group leaders and particularly our officers for all the work they've done on yet another Whittaker review.
Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Chairman. And I know we were pleased to see the officer Ian Ford back here today. Well, if there's an award to be given, I think it must be an award for his expertise and knowledge on Whittaker, because he's had plenty
Councillor
of...
Henderson, sorry, are you seconding it?
No.
I need a seconder.
Oh, no.
Sorry. Councillor Honeywood, okay. Now Councillor Henderson.
Yes. I just think the public really, since 2015, I mean, we've had a rough count up, and Councillor Calvin can supply the officers the information if they like. But I just think it'd be helpful for the residents of the Tendring district, because there's been about 50 movements and changes since 2015, from parties to names and everything else. It would be useful to have it on the website for those members who have made these changes and changed names, to have in their history of where they've moved from to, back to, there, back there. I think the public should have the right to actually see what sort of politics they are actually playing within their time of office, that they actually took the time to go out there and vote for them, because I don't think it's actually on, to be honest. The messing about that we've caused for officers and the confusion that we've presented to residents and the cost is just disgraceful.
Okay, I'll take that to the vote then. All those in favour? Any against? That's carried. Thank you very much. Item number 20, Report of Head of Leadership, Support and Community, A4. Councillor Stock.
The recommendation here, I'm just scribbling around for it. Yes, page 182, I'd like to move that recommendation. Council notes to revise proposals on the Parliamentary Boundary Review and determines whether Council has any comment on these. And if someone seconds that, I'll speak to it.
Second that, Chairman.
Councillor Honeywood.
Yeah, basically, this is the Parliamentary Boundary Review that is unlikely, I think, to actually happen in this Parliament, because I understand that the Democratic Unionist Party aren't happy with it because it doesn't do them any favours in Northern Ireland, and without them, the government, the Conservative Party in government don't have a majority. So for this parliamentary term, but then this parliamentary term, who knows how long that will be? It could be weeks. I did joke earlier that there could be another general election before Christmas. I think that's probably unlikely, but you never know. I'm not wishing for one, by the way. Last one didn't go so well for this side. So seriously, though, we've got a parliamentary boundary review here. Notwithstanding the fact that it's unlikely to come in, it will still exist as the boundary review, and then we could have a new government at any time that does put it through. So it is important that we have our say in it, and we should thank, I think, the Boundary Commission for England, because I have actually listened to our recommendation, this council's recommendation, that Jaywick should stay with Clacton as part of the same constituency as Clacton and not be severed off and cut off from it. That was the recommendation of this council, and they've taken it on board, and I applaud them for it, and I commend the recommendation on page 182 to the council. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any speakers? Councillor Buke.
Thank you, Chairman. Just referring to page 182, Harwich and Clacton County Constituency, if I may just comment on that paragraph where my ward of Holland and Kirby is referred to there. Within a new boundary change, it's going to be Great Holland, that is going to be grouped with Thorpe, Soken and Beaumont. But I did write to the Chief Executive about 5 years ago asking that the word Holland be changed to Great Holland, because it doesn't include Holland-on-Sea, and both residents and officers have been confused with this over the years, not very often, but sometimes there's confusion about what is Holland and what isn't, and this is clearly Great Holland, and I'll be grateful if that could be amended. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Chairman. This move actually takes me back to the theme tune, Things Can Only Get Better, because that will be better for Harwich, actually. And I'm pleased that the inspectors listened this time, because I was one of those who stood up against Lord Hanningfield at the time, who was trying to split, and he did succeed in splitting Harwich from the other coastal towns throughout this constituency. It was the worst move ever for the residents of Harwich, because we ended up with an MP who's more concerned about rural areas than he is about anything to do with any industrial and town area in Harwich. This, as I said earlier, this move can only be better, and I welcome the issue about Jaywick actually being back in there. It's a real good constituency. I always thought that had much more relationship between the coastal towns and everything alongside it than we did, which the argument was being put, that we had more relation with the railway going up the rail towards Manningtree and across the rurals. So I really welcome this, and I'm sure my Labour colleagues throughout this constituency will welcome this too.
Councillor Parsons.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, I completely agree. The idea of severing Jaywick from the rest of Clacton was just ludicrous, and I'm glad that the Boundaries Commission for England has listened to their responses. There's two things that I'd like to raise, and it's more of a kind of question than anything else, really, because I'm a little bit thick, so bear with me. Obviously, we have a threshold of constituents in order to make up the constituency in the same way that we had with the local government boundary reviews. And as we can see, both Harwich and Clacton County constituency and the North East Essex County constituency are fairly close to that upper threshold, which I see as a benefit because then it has longevity as well, because I think it's 5 or 10 years, isn't it, that they have to have a shelf life of. So I'm happy with that. The only thing I want to question, really, and I wonder if the members representing Little Clacton and Wheeley would like to comment on this, but am I right in thinking that geography has to come into play in some way, shape or form? And I know that the line has to be cut somewhere, but there is kind of not a great deal of distance certainly between Clacton and Little Clacton, and that of Wheeley. So I wondered if the members representing those wards were kind of had any idea as to whether people are in agreement with that or not. Thank you.
Councillor Stock.
Yeah, Chairman. Sorry. Yeah. I thank those people who've spoken to it. We have gone back to the Boundary Commission with regards to the JBIC issue, and that's been resolved. I'm obviously disappointed that Ivan doesn't want to be in the same constituency as me anymore.
Something you say?
You should have a crack at standing for it, Ivan. And it is, and he's right to say that it does basically go back to pretty much what it was when Ivan was the MP back in 1997. Without further ado, Chairman, I commend it to the Council.
Chairman, just before you do, if I may, one clarification. Councillor Buke reminded me that he sent me an email 5 years ago, which, amongst others, I do remember. And just to say that this is the parliamentary boundary review. This is not the ward boundary reviews, which obviously was a different piece of work and consultation. Hence, that not being relevant in this case. Thank you.
Thank you. All those in favour? Those against? Agreed. Thank you very much. Item 21, Report of Head of Leadership and Support Community A5. Councillor Honeywood.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to move as written, please. Don't think I have anything to add at this point.
Seconder. Is it a seconder? Yep, Councillor Stock. Councillor Calver.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. May I just place on record with regard to specifically to Harwich Town Council, who were seeking the review, that we have had excellent advice and support from TDC officers, and I would like to place on record our thanks to them.
Thank you very much. Councillor Parsons.
Sorry, thank you, Chairman. It will be a quick one, I promise. It's just a quick question. It says on here about Clacton Town Partnership. That suggests that it represents more than one person. So I just wondered if there was any clue as to how many people that actually represents. Thank you.
Councillor Honeywood.
Chairman, I'll have to find out and get back to you, but my understanding of the Clacton Town Partnership is it's made up of businesses, and those business owners may not even live in the area. But I will ask for that to be looked into, their membership, and a response sent to you.
Thank you. All those in favour? Those against? That's agreed. Thank you very much. Item 22, Report of Head of Governance and Legal Services, A6. Councillor Honeywood.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to move as written, with the exception that the Audit and Standards Committee are not combined. This follows a number of councillors approaching me to say that they had concerns about the setup we discussed, and they would like to see that change, which I'm happy to put forward to the Council. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Seconder? Councillor Henderson. Thank you very much. All those in favour? All those against? That's agreed. Thank you very much. Item number 23, decision notices on the outcome of the hearings taken by the Standards Committee. Monitoring Officer will be answering this one.
Members, you have before you the decision notice taken by, which records the decision which was taken by the Standards Committee on the 27th of September this year. It's on page 203 of your agenda. The decision relates to the complaint made against District Councillor Liz Benison. So it's just for noting.
Thank you very much. That's duly noted.
And on page 209 of your agenda, there is a second decision notice, which was the Standards Committee met on the same day, this time in relation to District Councillor Jack Parsons. Again, the contents of the decision are contained therein for noting.
That's duly noted. Thank you very much. Item number 24, urgent matters for debate. There are none. The date of the next meeting. We do have a provisional council meeting in the diary for the 28th of November, but as we have actually completed this evening's agenda, there will be no meeting next week. So the next meeting will be the 23rd of January next year. And could you please note you've got new copies of the Constitution on the tables before you. Thank you very much, members. Good evening. I look forward to seeing you in the parlour after the meeting.
Please be upstanding.